University. I'm Carlos Campos, the president here at Ashland, and we're grateful that you're here. In 1940, one of our early documents said that Ashland University was attempting to teach self-governance in a culture of love and respect. Well, that phrase still holds true for today. As a matter of fact, many of you know that recently part of that commitment was reflected in Ashland University's acceptance of the Chicago Principles. I'm reading a bit from those principles, and here's what it says. It's the university's fundamental commitment to the principle that debate or deliberation may not be suppressed because the ideas put forth are thought by some, or even by most members of the university community to be offensive, unwise, immoral, or wrong-headed. It is for the individual members of the university community, not for the university as an institution, to make those judgments for themselves. And to act on those judgments, not by seeking to suppress speech, but by openly and vigorously contesting the ideas that they oppose. As a matter of fact, we're trying to cultivate what David Foster Wallace has called the democratic spirit. I'm going to read you his definition so I don't get it wrong. One combines rigor and humility, i.e. a passionate conviction plus a sedulous respect for the conviction of others. As any American knows, this is a difficult spirit to cultivate and maintain, particularly when it comes to issues you feel strongly about. I think we all do. Equally tough is a democratic spirit's criterion of 100% intellectual integrity. You have to be willing to look honestly at yourself, and that your motives for believing what you believe and do it more or less continually. That's the commitment we make every day at Ashland University. It's one of the things that's reflected in this room today, our belief that an educated populace is one of the great privileges of living in America. So thank you for coming. Thank you to both of you. I can't think of a student who embodies that spirit more than the person who's next coming to the stage. Her name is Naomi Sims, and she's a great leader. You can't hire her because we want to hire her here at the university. She's a senior, and I'm going to hand her the microphone, and she'll take the next step for us. Thanks again for coming. Naomi?
Hello, thank you all for being here. We just want to say thank you for the Ashburn Center for sponsoring this event, but most of all, thank you to the students and the political organizations on campus, Young Americans for Liberty, College Democrats, and College Republicans, because this was their idea. And so that's just really exciting to see students being involved on this campus. Moderators for tonight's debate, Brad Dickin and Jeff Sakanga. Brad Dickin is the editorial page editor for the Chronicle, Telegram, and Elyria, Ohio. He has been with the paper since 2001, mostly working as a reporter. Prior to that, he spent 3 years with the Sandusky Register. He has a degree in history from the American University in Washington, D.C. Jeff Sakanga is co-director of the Ashford Scholar Program and a professor of political science at Ashland University, where he has taught since 1997. The timekeeper for tonight's debate is Jacob Nessel, the president of AU's chapter of Young Americans for Liberty. Ken Harbaugh is the Democratic candidate for Ohio's 7th Congressional District. He grew up in a military family, the son and grandson of Air Force combat pilots. Ken himself was a pilot in the Navy, where he flew reconnaissance missions in the Middle East and off of North Korea. Following his military service, he earned his law degree and co-founded a nonprofit to empower military men and women to keep serving in their communities. He is the recent president of Team Rubicon Global, a disaster relief organization that has helped train over 50,000 veterans to deploy in emergency response teams in Ohio and around the world. Ken and his wife, Anne-Marie, have 3 kids, Katie, Lizzie, and Henry. They live in Avon, Ohio. Bob Gibbs has been a member of Congress and is the Republican candidate for Ohio's 7th Congressional District. After graduating from The Ohio State University Agricultural Technical Institute, he founded Hidden Hollow Farms, a livestock production farm in Holmes County. He served as the president of the Ohio Farm Bureau Federation for 2 terms and has served on the Ohio Farm Bureau's Board of Trustees since 1985. He was elected to the Ohio House of Representatives in 2002 and the Ohio Senate in 2008. In Congress, he serves on the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee and the Agricultural Committee, serving as chair of the Subcommittee on Water Resources and the Environment. Bob and his wife Jody have been married for 36 years and have 3 grown children, Adam, Amy, and Andrew. Thank you both for being here.
Ladies and gentlemen, just a few quick reminders of the rules for the debate. We determined the order of speakers earlier through a coin toss. Mr. Harbaugh will speak first. There'll be a 3-minute opening statement, and then when we get into questions, there'll be 3 minutes for each candidate to answer with a 30-second rebuttal. The topics were agreed to in advance by the campaigns, and I just remind all of you, please hold your applause until the end of the debate and do not interrupt the speakers. Thank you. Question, please.
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you, Brad. Thank you, Ashland University and the Ashburn Center for hosting this debate. Thank you most of all to all of you for coming. This is democracy made real. When I think about the path that led me here to this stage tonight, I think about my time as a Navy pilot. I think about my heritage as a proud Ohioan. I think most of all about my 3 children. My middle daughter, Lizzie, was born with a pre-existing condition. One of the reasons I'm running is for her. She needed 4 surgeries before she turned 4 years old. And Anne Marie and I scheduled that first surgery not knowing how we would pay for it. Let me tell you, there's no fear quite like leaving an infant on an operating table and retreating to the waiting room and having all of that worry and concern about how that procedure is going to go, and having added to that the paralyzing fear that that decision is going to bankrupt your family. Now, thank God I was able to find a good job, a tough job, but a good job here in Ohio that paid for that surgery and for the next 3. But millions of Americans aren't so lucky. 4.8 million Ohioans have a pre-existing condition. And we have a representative who has voted 13 times to gut protections for families like ours with a loved one with a pre-existing condition. Now, I'm going to let you in on a secret. Congressman Gibbs is going to tell you that he cares about people with pre-existing conditions. He's going to tell you that he has always voted to take care of them. I want you to be ready for him to say it, because it is simply not true. Between 2007 and 2011, Congressman Gibbs voted 13 times to gut protections for pre-existing conditions. To prove it, I have given a list of those 13 votes to every member of the media in this room. I have asked my team to post that same list of 13 votes on Twitter and Facebook. So when Congressman Gibbs starts talking about health care, when he starts talking about pre-existing conditions, when he throws up the MacArthur Amendment smokescreen, I want you to think about my little girl Lizzie. I want you to think about the loved ones in your family with a pre-existing condition. And I want you to think about a congressman who says one thing to us in Ohio and then goes to Washington, D.C. and votes to take away our health care. It is time to send a new generation of leaders to Washington who mean what they say, who fight for health care, for our jobs, and for our country. Thank you.
Well, first of all, I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight. It's great to see such a great turnout. I also want to thank my opponent for his service to our country and all the veterans that are here. I always remember that, the service they've done and the family sacrifices. You know, this midterm election is really about results versus resistance. We did a common sense regulatory reform bill, a tax cuts and jobs bill. And the result is we have a booming economy by every metric. Lowest unemployment in nearly 50 years, 4 million new jobs in the last year and a half, 500,000 good paying manufacturing jobs. African American, Hispanic, 18 to 34-year-olds, women, teenagers, the lowest unemployment on record. We have a 3.5% and higher annual GDP growth. There's more jobs and job seekers. When I travel out through the district and meet with businesses, their biggest challenge right now is finding help. I guess that's a great thing if you're looking for a job. Real wage compensation has grown 1.4% over the past year after accounting for inflation. Just recently saw consumer spending report unexpectedly consumer spending rose 4%. That means more money, people got more money in their pocket. We're rebuilding our national defense after Obama's disastrous sequester. We reformed our VA administration and providing resources to ensure our vets get the help and they deserve in a timely fashion and appropriate fashion. The world is safer when America has a strong economy and providing resources to support our brave men and women in uniform with the best equipment and the best and most sophisticated weapon systems. This Congress and the House passed without Democratic support a bill to lower health care costs and protect pre-existing conditions, contrary to what my opponent just said. Questions in this election: do we want to go back to where we were when President Obama said the new norm is less than 2% growth, or at best, less opportunities? If the Democrats take over what they said they'd take over, what they would do? They would hold impeachment hearings for Justice Kavanaugh and President Trump. Repeal your tax cuts, abolish ICE, open borders, and protect and fund sanctuary cities. All when we just learned today, a third caravan is mounting in Honduras and Guatemala to come up to our border, a third caravan. This is really about socialism versus America. Case in point, the majority of the Democratic caucus supports a plan to enforce Americans to abandon their employer-provided health care and put everyone in a government-controlled health care program, a single-payer government takeover of health care that costs $32 trillion, would require income taxes to double and ends Medicare as we know it. Simply put, the Democrats continue their agenda of resistance and obstruction, unwilling to work with us on tax reform, regulatory reform, immigration reform, and welfare to work initiatives. My opponent says he's not going to be withholding anybody, but we'll get talking later about where all these monies come from the liberals out west. And we cannot allow the liberals and Hollywood elites to buy the seat in the heartland of America.
First question for Mr. Harbaugh on jobs and the economy. Since 2017, January, the unemployment rate has gone down to about 3.7% and economic growth has increased. Despite these positive trends, the federal budget deficit has risen to almost $1 trillion for fiscal year 2019, and the federal debt has increased by almost $3 trillion in the last 2 years. One of the citizens who submitted a question through our Google Forms, Mr. Brian Dill from Polk, Ohio, says that while both parties talk about controlling the deficit, at the end of the day, the deficit continues to rise. Building on Mr. Dill's comment, the question is this: how can the federal government continue to promote economic growth and job creation while trying to bring down the federal budget deficit?
The federal budget deficit is at historic proportions, and the first thing we have to do is call a spade a spade. When you look at the tax bill that Congressman Gibbs is so proud of, well, I am grateful for that sliver that went to middle-class families. The burden of debt put on every middle-class family in the United States is $23,000. And I would ask the middle-class families in this room, like I've asked myself and my friends, did you get your share of that $23,000 of debt? I don't think so. The worst thing about this tax bill is that the vast majority of the giveaway went to people making more than $1 million in corporations, including a provision that actually incentivizes the shipping of jobs overseas. So when you talk about economic growth, the first thing we have to do is tell the truth about a tax bill that actually pays companies to ship good jobs overseas. But we need to get back to building things here in Ohio again, like we used to. We need an infrastructure bill that addresses the 1,600 crumbling bridges in this country, but that goes beyond just roads and potholes and thinks much more expansively about infrastructure to include education, the foundation of any 21st century economy, and high-speed internet. To the point about hiring and job growth, the fact is that wages have not kept up with inflation. It is harder than ever for working families to get by. I had a conversation with a gentleman around the corner at the mart where we live, who talked about picking up a third shift just so he could afford ballet lessons for his daughter. There is something humiliating about having to look your children in the eye and admit to them that you are not going to be able to leave them what your parents left you. And that is where we are as a country. Wall Street is not Main Street. And I think Congress needs to be reminded of that. that wages have not kept up with inflation, that we don't have an investment in infrastructure that is going to provide that foundation for economic growth going into the 21st century. And I'll point you to just one stat, because it really hits home. That lack of investment in high-speed internet, the foundation of the 21st century economic investment. We have the 400th worst internet connectivity in the nation out of 435 congressional districts. If that's not bad enough, we have a congressman who sits on the Agricultural Committee, which controls investment in rural high-speed internet. It's not just that Congressman Gibbs lacks the power or the leadership role to do his job, he is failing to do it even when he has the power. That's inexcusable.
Mr. Gibbs?
Thank you. Talk about debt. Let's not forget when President Obama, the Democrats controlled, he doubled debt, all combined from George Washington to President Obama. They doubled the debt. So let's not talk about what the Democrats do. We talk about the tax bill. The reason we have to do the tax bill is we have to grow this economy, and we're seeing that growth. We had less than 2% GDP growth, and President Obama said that was the new norm. Couldn't do any better. You have to get a magic wand to do something better. I think we found the magic wand. And we got this economy growing at 3.5% or higher this year. And you take a $20 trillion economy, 1.5 to 3.5%, that's a big deal. And we're seeing more people working, more people are paying FICA taxes, more people paying for Social Security and Medicare. So that's all a good thing. We saw $305 billion come back first quarter this year from our businesses overseas because we lowered that tax rate from 35% for C Corps down to 21% and did a one-time 15.5% to bring that, repatriate that money. It's coming back. That's why we've seen 400 to 500,000 new manufacturing jobs. Manufacturing is coming back to this country. So we're growing this economy. We cannot cut our way out of this problem. We got to be responsible, but we also have to grow the economy. And you talk about internet. Currently, my opponent hasn't read the Farm Bill, because in the Farm Bill that we just passed out of the House, we have a vision for internet, and I fully support President Trump's initiative, the $200 billion initiative for infrastructure, which we're going to do an infrastructure bill either later this year or first of next year, and $50 billion of that is earmarked to leverage private sector money for rural America. And I do believe that we are on a process here where when President Eisenhower was president, he started the interstate highway system. Just think where we didn't have that. That's where we are with rural broadband, internet. And now we got the new 5G technology coming on, and we got good opportunities here. But when we did a tax bill that helps families, we doubled the child income tax credit from $1,000 to $2,000. That's a tax credit, dollar from your tax bill. And if you don't have a federal tax bill, you get a $1,400 refund from the federal government. We kept the earned income tax credit, so we're helping the lower income people on the tax scale. But we're seeing, we just passed in the House what we call Income Tax 2.0. That'll help local businesses, small businesses get started and grow, and also help families save more money and save for their kids' college education. And universal, call them USA accounts, universal savings accounts, to help savings tax-free for anything they want to do. And we some other changes proposed. So we changed some of the important tax credits, like the housing tax credit, to help as we rejuvenate, seeing our small towns in rural America, our inner cities. So there's been quite a bit done in the tax bill that's growing this economy, and that's why you see this kind of growth, and that's why you see more people, more jobs available to those people. That's a big turnaround from 2 years ago. So I'm really encouraged what's happening, and we need to do more. But when he says that, oh, my time is up, but I'll just say quickly, the 83% for the 1%, that's false, because that's counting that individual tax return ended tax breaks because no Democrat would support us, so make it permanent.
What Congressman Gibbs failed to is the $23,000 of debt that every family in America has assumed because of this tax burden. He thinks the economy in Ohio is doing well because he's not in Ohio. He's in Washington working for his corporate paymasters, where he has saw fit to raise his pay 3 times while voting against an increase in the minimum wage 5 times. The only organization in American life that gets to set its own pay that way, you know who has the best health care in this room? Congressman Gibbs. You know who has the best pension plan in this room? Congressman Gibbs. Don't you think we deserve a share of that?
Congressman Gibbs, the next question is to you. For many Americans, the cost of health insurance and health care is a key economic concern because of the price increases that seem to come every year. Drug costs continue to go up. Many with pre-existing conditions fear they will lose coverage and protections are removed. What should be done to rein the cost of health care, health insurance, and drug prices, while also ensuring access to medical care for those with pre-existing conditions?
Great question. Glad you asked it, Brad. What we need to do is get competition back in the marketplace. We don't have competition in the marketplace. You know, people are conflating. You've got your large group employers, your small group employers, and individual market. Now, Obamacare made some adjustments across the board, but it's mostly focused on the individual market, which is, by the way, 7% of the people that have insurance. And so a lot of my Democrat colleagues in Congress are talking is let's do Medicare for all, let's get people out of the employer market on Medicare for all and destroy the Medicare as we know it today. An absolute disaster. And so what we need to do in healthcare is get that competition back in there. Let's increase the health savings accounts so people can use that to pay for routine and preventative care. Let's make sure. I know I had my neighbor come to me earlier this year and said, I just got a letter, and she's on the individual, she's on the exchanges, and said they're not going to cover insurance next year. I can't go to buy insurance. We had 3 counties in this district. That was the case. We got that worked out. So you're lucky if you got 1 insurer. If you got 2 insurers to pick from, you're really lucky. Now think about it, there's just no competition. And now what we're seeing, since we've opened this up now, President Trump did one thing Obamacare did away with association plans. You all had to go in the exchanges if you were in the individual market. And so what happened now, you go to association plans. I just saw an ad on TV. Some entity advertising must be an association plan. If you don't like what you have to buy on the exchanges, come to us. We're opening it up. We're giving consumers choices. So now, this month, we're actually seeing a stabilizing of prices for the pricing for the premiums for the individual market for next year. Maybe some going down because it's always been increasing. So we're seeing competition is really the answer to that. And pre-existing conditions, a bill we passed last year, the American Health Care Act, protected pre-existing conditions. I'm a strong advocate to protect pre-existing conditions. There's no question about that. And if you were in a large employer plan, that was an issue anyways. And so pre-existing conditions are going to get protected. We made that sure it was in our bill last year that we passed out of the House. Obviously, the Senate dropped it. But we're going to make sure that pre-existing conditions is taken care of. And anybody that's had insurance, they should not lose insurance because they got sick. And our bill says if you let it lapse, we give you a 63-day window, and you get back in. And if you never bought insurance, we have a provision to get back in and pay a surcharge for 1 year, and you're back at the rate to pay a penalty for not doing the responsible thing. But in this bill, states can get waivers if they come up with plans that's better than what they can get on the exchanges to protect pre-existing conditions. So all this rhetoric out there is saying it's not true. It's absolutely true. We're protecting pre-existing conditions. The president's talking about that. And whatever we pass, a co-sponsor of another bill that says anything we do in replacement of Obamacare, that pre-existing conditions will be taken care of.
The president called the health care plan that Congressman Gibbs voted for mean because it took away protections for pre-existing conditions. We need a health care system that works for all of Iowans. For all of Iowans. And yet we have a congressman who has voted time and time again to take away our health care, to take away protections for pre-existing conditions. For me, this is not political, it is deeply personal. And it's deeply personal for just about everyone across this district that I've talked to. I've knocked on thousands of doors. And on one of these recent doors, I had a conversation with a woman. I was talking to her about Lizzie. And no sooner had I finished telling her about that feeling of leaving a child on an operating table that she began to cry. And she told me about her 25-year-old daughter who had just had a double mastectomy for an aggressive tumor. And they were terrified as a family about where their daughter was going to get health care. Who was going to take on that risk? They were terrified about who was going to employ her. What employer was going to take on that risk? We need a system that guarantees protections for people with pre-existing conditions, that stabilizes the markets by funding the exchanges to finally, at long last, bring down premium costs. Premiums are going to go up again in Ohio this year, according to the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Studies. We need a system that allows early Medicare buy-in for older Americans, and I would go one step beyond that and encourage access to the FEHB for younger Americans, the Federal Employee Health Care Benefit Plan. And yet we have a congressman who has failed to lead on any of these ideas and has done worse, has hurt Ohioans. If we're simply ideological, if the vote to take away nearly $400 billion from Medicare was about ideas, if the votes against pre-existing condition was about ideas, I might be able to have an honest disagreement. But at the end of the day, we know what it's about with Congressman Gibbs. It's about money. You look at the $1 million our congressman has taken from corporate PACs, $123,000 of those dollars from insurance companies on the eve of those votes to take away health care from nearly 500,000 Ohioans. And it begs the question, sir, is there anything in your office that is not for sale?
Well, my opponent's got the Democrat talking points done really well. Healthcare Act, there's a Tom McCarthy, New Jersey amendment we worked on really hard that says, and I'll just read it to you, no state under any circumstances may ever obtain a waiver for guaranteed issue of coverage, guaranteed renewability of coverage, or the prohibition on denying coverage due to pre-existing conditions. This amendment specifically clarifies that provisions cannot be construed as allowing insurers to limit coverage for those with pre-existing conditions. All these protections remain in the law. And I believe most of my insurance company is Westfield employees who have here in Ohio, nationwide, and then we invite Dr. Clear in the shine.
Question number 3 on education from Mr. Harbaugh. Since the passage of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act in 1965, federal funding for K through 12 and college education has grown to almost $200 billion a year. At the same time, overall K through 12 student achievement has remained basically the same, and college student debt has reached $1 trillion. In light of this situation, Mr. Joseph Muir of Mansfield, Ohio, submitted through a Google form, wants to know whether Congress should change the way the federal government is involved in education. For example, should federal education money be cut or should it be increased?
Thank you. We need to maintain local control of schools, of primary and secondary schools. When it comes to institutes of higher learning and advanced degrees, I think we are at a critical juncture in American history where we can actually marry two problems and turn them into solutions. The problems being this epic load of college debt that so many students take on because they want to better themselves. And what I see is a crisis of citizenship. Imagine if we gave young people who wanted a chance to serve their country in exchange for some help with that college debt, the opportunity to do a year of national service. I think the time has come for a year of national service. I come from a family of teachers. Anne Marie spent the first half of her career in the toughest school she could find. Both of my parents taught. My father-in-law spent 38 years in Medina High School. And our schools should be palaces, yet they are falling apart. All 3 elementary schools in Massillon are over 60 years old. And we have a congressman who doesn't listen, who doesn't appreciate the gravity of the problem, who doesn't even listen to teachers. I had a conversation with Mr. Davis, who taught high school for decades in Medina County. And he used to assign his students an extra credit assignment to reach out to a representative at the State House or in Congress, a state senator, a congressman. And when they got a letter back, they would read it in front of the classroom and get a little extra credit. Mr. Davis had to tell his students to stop writing to Congressman Gibbs because he never wrote back. And the symptoms of that inattention are everywhere you look, not just the 3 elementary schools in Massillon that are over 60 years old, but the half of the districts in the state that have deteriorating schools, the fact that we had to shut down schools this fall because they didn't have air conditioning. Imagine if we shut down a business and sent everyone home because it was too hot to work there. We wouldn't put up with it. Yet somehow, that is okay when it comes to education. And worst of all, the staffing levels. I talk to teachers who are so overworked, and most of all, counselors who have between 300 and 400 students. They're not talking to those kids about their educational pathway. They're worried about which kids are hungry. They're worried about which kids are on the verge of a mental crisis that might turn into a catastrophe. And let me boil it down to one number, 250. For years, the teachers in my family have counted on a $250 tax credit to help defray some of the costs of the out-of-pocket expenses that every teacher takes on to run a classroom. In the tax bill that Congressman Gibbs voted for, billions of dollars of write-offs were afforded to corporations. That $250 tax credit for teachers was eliminated. That gives you a sign of his priorities.
First time and not have a record, you pretty much say anything you want. $250 tax credit went away because we lowered everybody's tax bill. You're going to pay less taxes this year unless you pay a lot more money. I can guarantee you're paying less taxes. Generally, my feelings on education, it's really a state and local issue. Now, I don't have a problem with federal grant money, and I'll get to that here in a second. But you know, every time Washington makes mandates, like they did the No Child Left Behind, I know our school districts really love that, right? Well, we passed a bill to change that. They don't have to have that mandate anymore. They don't have that extra cost. They can do what they want. The state's not punished for it. So the curriculum and all that should be designed at the local level and the state level. And one thing that we see happening, especially in higher education, we see some competition happening. You know, I travel the district. We've got some great community colleges here, technical schools, and I know it's not the proper place to say this, a four-year school, but I'm going to say it. I can't help it. But I think he knows, too, the competition's a good thing. But we're seeing kids graduate from high school, some with associate degrees, some going to these two more years of training, getting a $60,000 a year job and no debt. And that's putting pressure on our traditional four-year schools, and they're doing a better job. I know here at Ashland University, they cut their tuition, and I know at Ohio State University, if you go in as a freshman now, they guarantee you that tuition all the way through for 4 years, and they guarantee you'll be done in 4 years, not this 4.5 or 5 year stuff. And so we passed the Strengthening Career Technical Education 21st Century Act here in July. President signed it into law. Also, we've done some things, $1.9 billion for career and technical adult education, and also more $5 million, $300 million, $5 million above last year's level for veterans, more educational levels to help our veterans get the training they need so they can go out and get a good job. But like I said, the Common Core, we did away with that. Funding in this fiscal year 2019 started October 1, the appropriation bill. Signed into law, overall $71 billion for the Department of Education. That's a $581 million above fiscal year 18. And we did for Title I grants to help $100 million more for help for financial assistance to local education in schools with numbers of children with low-income families. The IDEA program, the Gear Up, the TRIO program, we funded that, increased the funding for mental health services for students and bullying prevention program. So those are the things the federal government can do. The federal government should not be dictating to the states and locals and mandating it. But if they want to send some of the money back to them, I've been supportive of that. Thanks.
It is about... It's a question of priorities. Congressman Gibbs managed to find billions upon billions of dollars for tax write-offs for corporations, for pencils and paper and office supplies, while eliminating that small gesture, $250 for teachers. I have traveled to more high schools and elementary schools and middle schools across this district than I can count. And you know one of the most common questions I get? Who is our congressman? Because they have never seen him.
Question is to you. Last year, roughly 72,000 Americans died from drug overdoses. In Ohio, the figure was 4,854. In Lorain County alone, one of the counties in the 7th Congressional District, 132 people died from overdoses in 2017. What steps should the federal government be taking to combat the opioid epidemic?
Great question, and you're right, it is an epidemic. And just to be reported, we think it's starting to level off. It's still increased from last year. I just read the Columbus Dispatch, I saw another report, and I think we're starting to make progress because what's happening? We had a bipartisan bill, President Obama signed it, it was called the CARE Act, $1 billion, that's a B, went out, and that money's come out to the states and locals. In this year's earlier budget bill, we did another $3 billion. In September, in the last budget bill, we did another $7 billion. So $11 billion is coming out to the states and locals. And I held numerous roundtables throughout the districts. I'm in the district a lot, contrary to what my opponent says. I think he's traveling a lot out of Los Angeles, where he's way to Hollywood League. Together. We brought the medical community, the law enforcement, the drug treatment people, and they all said they're starting to see this money. And one of the things that's really important is we got to get more treatment centers. And President Obama just signed a bill yesterday to do that, and get more money out for treatment centers. And what we're finding when you get people into treatment, we have a pretty good success. You know, you guys get interrupted from this campaign. You can go to your constituents or what?
They're your constituents, Congressman Gibbs.
Constituent supporters.
You represent the entire Ohio Senate, both sides of this hall.
Now, the thing that really scares me about the opioid epidemic, I've learned this from the medical community, that some people, when they go in and have surgery for an accident or injury, and they on pain medicine, some people can get addicted to these narcotics like Oxycontin after 3 days. That's what's really scary. So I want everybody aware of that. Therefore, you do it. Now the medical community is aware of that, and we're starting to make that change. And so I've been fully supportive of more funding and programs, which held these meetings, and we're seeing I think we're starting to turn the corner. A lot of it's about awareness and education. It was everybody at state, local, and national levels, and all the stakeholders realize that now, and resources flowing in from state government, federal government, and we're all working together, and I think we're starting to turn that corner to really address the issue now, because we are aware there's a problem, and we're educated on what the problem is and how to address the problem.
It has been 8 years, and parents continue to bury their children. It is time we call this epidemic what it is, a full-blown crisis. I'm not some late arrival to this issue. I was the president of a disaster relief organization. I've been in camps on the verge of epidemic outbreaks. I know what I'm looking at when I see it. I am getting sick and tired of talking to grandparents and parents and siblings who talk about bringing their loved one to the treatment center. And they arrive, and the charge they're signing in says, first of all, thank you so much for arriving. At this point is a critical step on the pathway to recovery. And then choking back tears. That nurse says, come back in a few weeks. We don't have a bed. We don't have the funding. And you know what? They almost never make it back. Congressman Gibbs, you might not be aware, but Stark County, the most populous county in the district, had to rent a freezer truck to handle the overflow. He's talked about the $11 billion of funding spread across 50 states that is washing over this epidemic and supposedly making these beds available. It is a drop in the bucket. When you keep in mind that we lost more people from heroin overdoses in this country last year alone than we lost during the entire Vietnam War, $1 trillion war, let's get serious about the epidemic we're facing. We need to fund the CARE Act. The CARE Act, which has bipartisan support from Senators Portman and Senator Brown, but hasn't been mentioned once by Congressman Gibbs. We need to stop cutting funding for health care in the middle of an epidemic. $450 billion cut from Medicare. And again, if this were just an argument about ideas, we might be able to have the kind of disagreement I want to see in our politics. But it's not about ideas. It is about money. It is about the $1 million from corporate PACs. It's about the $123,000 that Congressman Gibbs has taken from the insurance industry. And worst of all, the money he continues to take from Cardinal Healthcare. Cardinal Healthcare, a company that has been sued by Mike DeWine, the Republican Attorney General. Cardinal Healthcare has been sued by Mike DeWine for its role in creating the opioid epidemic, the first manufactured epidemic in human history, and our congressman continues to take their money. Sir, please answer for that.
We'll see. He talks about corporate PACs. This is another misleading, misinterpreting thing that the Democrats talk about, my opponent talks about. Years ago, PACs were set up, and what it is, employees of the business voluntarily can contribute to the PAC. The PAC has to be a separate board that controls it, not the total corporate board. If it's an association like the Farm Bureau, members of the Farm Bureau join, contribute to the PAC voluntarily, unlike some of the union money that he gets, that's mandatory, except now I guess the Supreme Court is going to change that. So this is, it talks about insurance companies. I got some money from right here in next to the district, or in Westfield in Township in Medina County. Westfield, it's called the Westfield Employees PAC.
Congressman, around time.
Oh, okay. I forgot what you were.
All right, our fifth question on national security to Mr. Harbaugh first. President Trump has claimed that national security requires stricter controls on the legal and illegal flow of people into the United States. So, among other policies, the president has imposed a ban on travel from certain countries and has argued for building a wall along the U.S.-Mexico border. The president has made a similar argument on trade, claiming that national security requires imposing or threatening to impose safeguard tariffs on products like steel, aluminum, solar panels, and washing machines from countries such as China, South Korea, Mexico, and Canada. Do you agree with President Trump that national security requires supporting his policies on immigration and trade?
We are a nation of laws. We have to secure our borders. We have to take every instance on a case-by-case basis. But can we get serious about the existential threats we face as a nation? I flew the first recon mission off of North Korea after 9/11. And I remember briefing my crew as the sun came up, telling them, I didn't give a lot of speeches before missions, but I gave one this morning. Because I said, make every decision like your life depends on it, because on this flight, your life very well may depend on it. The lives of everyone you love back at home very well may depend on it. I served on the front lines of some of the most challenging and intractable national security crises our country has faced. I flew recon missions off nuclear-equipped adversaries like China and North Korea. I flew over the Middle East during Operation Enduring Freedom. And I think we need to start having a serious conversation about the actual threats our nation faces, the existential threats our nation faces. We are 17 years into the longest wars in America's history, and we have a Congress that refuses to call them wars. That is an abdication of their Article I responsibility under the Constitution. But I think I know why. Because we have today the lowest proportion of veterans in Congress than at any point in modern history. There is a direct connection between that and the misadventures we've gotten into over the last 17 years, the misadventures we continue to get into. We are about to pull out of the INF Treaty, a nuclear treaty that eliminated an entire class of weapons 30 years ago, a treaty that my father was on the front lines of implementing as the commander of a nuclear missile wing in Europe under Ronald Reagan. And we are about to embark on a new nuclear arms race because we lack the seriousness in Congress to address these threats. Think about this. We are about to send young men and women to Afghanistan who were born after 9/11. And we have a Congress that has virtually no experience in wartime. Now I know Congressman Gibbs has joked about his service in Washington being every bit as risky, every bit as dangerous as the service of those who put on body armor, who walk patrol in Fallujah, who walk patrol in Kandahar. Congressman Gibbs, I'm going to yield my time to give you a chance to apologize to the 50,000 veterans in this district.
I am a veteran. How dare you? How dare you? You don't treat veterans like that. You apologize to Congressman Gibbs.
Well, he's misinterpreted what happened in that little interview. Obviously, when our men and women, our brave soldiers, go into the service, their lives on the line, there's no comparison to that, and I truly honor and respect that and thank them for that service. But what happened in the interview, a thought came across my mind, and I said, members of Congress face some dangers too. I should never have said it, but what a lot of people in my mind was we had to give for Steve Scalise and some other people, and also a few years ago when I was attacked in my house by a person. And that's what that was coming through my mind. I stopped right there and I said, this is not a joke. I'm not joking. He's misinterpreting what I'm saying. He's trying to make a political hate out of that. I want to talk about what the officer said. Russia, we're pulling out. We're not pulling out. We're trying to renegotiate. President Trump threatens to do things. We'll see what happens to get their attention. But they've been cheating. And China's not part of that. China needs to be part of that agreement too. So let's just like we're doing trade deals, let's renegotiate, let's relook at these, and not just go on and on and on and be a bunch of patsies. National security, we've been rebuilding the military under the previous administration and the Democrats. They gutted the military. We're rebuilding that now. You check the military. I know this happened after my appointed service, because he left right before the Obama administration, what happened with the sequester. But we're putting more money into that, we're rebuilding it. When I heard that we have to go and steal parts off planes that can't fly to make our planes fly. When I hear that some of our pilots now in the Air Force only get 4 hours a month training, last year we lost more people in training than we did in actual combat, like 4 to 1. That's not right. So we're making sure they're getting the equipment. We're putting the military, we're building that up, and we're increasing that budget, and we're seeing the change. We're seeing how much safer we are, where he talks about extra threats. Kim Jong-un is not launching any ICBMs or trying to develop nuclear weapons. We're actually talking. That's a good thing. We got tough sanctions on North Korea. We got tough sanctions on Iran. People in Iran are trying to rebel, but they can't do it. So the tough sanctions are helping the world is safer. Hopefully, we never have to use our awesome forces, but it's one heck of a deterrent. When President Trump sent 2 aircraft carrier groups over to North Korea and got China to close the border to trade with them, that put a big hurt on Kim Jong-un. And it's really important. That's why he comes to the table, because he doesn't value life like we do here in America. The only life he values is his own. And you have to be tough. You just can't be a patsy. And President Trump is being tough, and we're seeing the results because the world is a safer place, and he's not launching ICBMs or trying to develop nuclear weapons. So the jury's still out. We'll see what happens. But I feel a lot more encouraged than I did 12 months ago.
Paid lip service all he wants to our men and women in uniform, but we are a nation at war, 17 years into the longest wars in America's history, and Congress has not done its job. And there is no emptier expression of support than thanking veterans for their service and then voting to take health care away from their families.
All right, we've arrived at the closing statement portion of the program. Mr. Harbaugh, you have the first 3 minutes.
There is a clear choice, and you have seen it on display tonight. This campaign from day one has been about people. You've seen some of that passion in this room and the 100,000 conversations we've had across this district during the course of this campaign. On the other hand, we have a congressman who has forgotten how to listen. You've seen some of that as well tonight. He answers not to us, but to his corporate paymasters. There is a saving grace, though, and it's us. It's Ohio. You've heard the phrase, as Ohio goes, so goes the nation. It's because we still make up our own minds here. We still try to do what's right for our families, for our communities, for our country. It's what I love about my state. I was born in a military family. I mentioned my father served on the front lines during the Cold War under Ronald Reagan, commanding a nuclear missile wing. When it was my turn, I joined the Navy. But I met an Ohio girl 25 years ago, and I fell in love. We got married in Medina, and the day after that wedding, I didn't go on a honeymoon. I was back in the cockpit, back on duty, because that is what military families do. They go where the country calls them. But after my time in uniform, we found our way home, back to Ohio, to raise our family, our 3 kids. I still think about that oath of office, though, every day, what it meant then, what it means now. Because that oath wasn't to a party. It wasn't to any one individual. It was to you. It was to the Constitution of the United States. It's the same oath that politicians swear, but there is something different when you put your life on the line for it, when more importantly, you've lost friends because of that oath. Tonight, we saw a glimpse of who Congressman Gibbs is. We saw a glimpse of what that oath means to him. He votes with Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell nearly 99% of the time. Corporate and political paymasters tell him what to do, he does it. When they tell him to come after our Social Security, he does it. When they tell him to cut $450 billion from Medicare, he does it. When they tell him to make it easier to ship jobs overseas, he does it. It is time for that to end. It is time to send a representative to Congress who works for us.
Yes.
During my last mission in the Navy off of North Korea, we lost a engine. In that moment, I didn't turn to my co-pilot and say, are you a Republican or a Democrat? We put the engine to bed. We finished the mission. That is what we have to get back to in our politics. That is how we fix our country. My name is Ken Harbaugh, and I ask for your vote in November so we can bring that core Ohio value, country over party, back to Washington. Thank you.
Well, it's got all good Democrat talking points down, that's for sure. Since I voted to cut Social Security and Medicare, that's a true falsehood. You know how they come up with that? Because we cut your taxes. They're saying we're cutting your Medicare and Social Security to cut your taxes and grow this economy. Like, you should ask yourself a question, or somebody asks you, when you go vote, or somebody asks you how to vote, are you better off now than you were 2 years ago? Are you more confident? More jobs are available? More jobs are available? Your neighbors are working? Your kids are getting graduated from school? They got to find a job they couldn't find a few years ago? Things are better. America is safer. And I think the answer is yes. The economy is stronger. We're rebuilding our Pittsburgh. Vladimir Putin hasn't done any more expansion. Iran is under tough sanctions. ISIS has been decimated. America is strong economically. The world is a safer place. But we are really at a fork in the road. We can't go back to a stagnant economy, lost jobs and opportunities, bigger government, more red tape, and more taxes. We're continuing on a path of strong economic growth and opportunities for all Americans. Strengthen our free market capitalist economic model, and some of the other side are advocating for socialism. This race, a million Americans in our heartland are experiencing millions of dollars coming in to their coffers, and my opponent included. 94% of the money he's raised is from outside of Ohio. It's from the liberals in Hollywood. It's from the liberals in New York City, in Boston. Liberals are trying to buy this house seat in America's heartland and force their liberal agenda on all of us. Let's not let this scam happen to us. This is a scam. House Republicans for solutions, not just slogans and complaints. We are heading in the right direction and have more to do. We do need to fix health care, lower the cost of insurance, incorporate free market principles and get competition, encourage health savings accounts, invisible premium support for the programs for pre-existing conditions. And I've never voted, when it talks about we voted to take health care away from Americans, we were voting to get rid of Obamacare. That was a disaster. People couldn't afford it. We also need to have an immigration program. We need a legal immigration where individuals come here and can support themselves and contribute to our economy and society. A workable guest worker program that's accountable, verifiable, and enforced. Welfare to work policies to help people with strong workforce development programs, which we're doing. And we're infrastructure. We're going to do an infrastructure bill. We're going to get it done. And some of the things are in that bill are things to lower the cost of the bills that I introduced to help that doing. So let's keep moving forward with solutions like the tax bill 2.0, the House just passed, to grow their businesses, more universal savings accounts, innovation, and let's unleash the American spirit of entrepreneurship, innovation, competition, creating opportunities for all Americans in a safer and secure America. Let's keep down this right path. I'm Bob Gibbs, and I'm fighting for you.
Thank you, Mr. Harbaugh. Thank you, Mr. Congressman. I want to thank our wonderful panel, Jeff, Brad. Thank you so much.
Dr. Campo and the student body here at AU for hosting us. I want to thank the college Republicans, the college Democrats, and the Young Americans for Liberty for helping organize this. And I'd also like to thank a special shout out to my colleague and friend at the Ashland Center, Ben Kunkel, who put together the logistics of all of this. A special round of applause for him. I want to thank all of you for coming out tonight. The American experiment has been going on since 1776. And it's an experiment that our founders believed worthy of their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor. And it's an experiment to see whether or not people are capable of governing themselves through reflection and choice. So I hope what we witness here tonight will help you reflect on your decision and make a choice when you go to the polls on Tuesday. I will leave you with one final charge to go and do your civic duty on Tuesday and vote. Thank you so much for your time.